Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest in the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today is a very special episode. We have a return guest coming on, Brieane Olson, CEO over at Pacsun. And let me tell you, Bree just released a new book, co-created the cultural strategy that redefined Pacsun. I've been excited and eagerly awaiting her return to the show. Bree, welcome back. So good to see your face.
So nice to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
All right, so we got a lot to talk about here today. I definitely want to get into the book and we'll get into some other things that are going on. I know there was a Harvard Business School published a case study on Pacsun's co-creation strategy. We're going to get into that and a whole lot more. But before we do that, we'll start this episode the way that we start them all with our Mission Matters Minute. So, Bree, at Mission Matters, our aim and our goal is to amplify stories for entrepreneurs, for executives, for experts. That's what we do. Bree, what mission matters to you?
At Pacsun, our mission is to inspire the next generation of youth. And we do that by building community at the intersection of music, fashion, art, and sport to create a better world for young people tomorrow.
Amazing. Love bringing mission-based individuals on here to share why they do what they do, how they're doing it, and really what we can all learn from that so we grow together. So great having you back on. And let's just dive right in. I want to get into this book. So co-created the cultural strategy that redefined Pacsun. What inspired this work?
Yeah, so I've been at Pacsun at the brand for almost 2 decades, and I have been able to participate and help lead a beautiful transformation of a legacy brand from a retailer that was really known for surf and skate into one of the premier youth brands chosen by youth today in the retail landscape. So we look at ourselves as a disruptor in the space and
Mm.
really have done that through driving change through purpose and really being hyper focused on partnering with our community and treating our consumer as a co-creator versus an audience.
Mm. Let's go further into that as we unpack the book and just the overall philosophy of Paxson. I know I went to one of your events and I covered and I got to do a bunch of interviews with the influencers and brand representatives you had there. And I saw how you were connecting across generations and in many different genres. Could you define what that concept of co-create means? Like, what does co-created mean?
Yeah, I think co-created is very different than a collaboration. I
Mm.
think for many decades, PacSun was known for partnering with great brands or having a collaboration with a brand or celebrity. But the power of co-creation is really starting with the purpose of bringing the community into the center, into the epicenter of what the brand's next chapter of future growth looks like, and really
Mm.
operationalizing what co-creation means, meaning stakeholders. It changes who is important, how your decisions are made through all the different areas of the business, all of the different divisions, all of the different ways that we engage with the consumer. So some of the things that we did to operationalize the power of co-creation and bringing our community to the center were things such as the Youth Advisory Council. And last year you had, last September, the opportunity to join us at our first ever PacSun Purpose Summit, where our youth
Oh,
advisory.
was that the first one? I don't know. It was such a well-run event. I just gotta say it was amazing. I couldn't tell it wasn't the 10th. It was the first. It was an amazing event. Go ahead, please
Well,
continue.
look forward to your invitation for this year. We're doing it again.
Yeah.
We were able to bring our first Youth Advisory Council
Mm.
to meet all of our brand partners, to be celebrated by our community, and to have a real seat at the table. These young people, there are 12 of them, kind of from the ages of 12 to 26. So a real range from Gen Alpha and Gen Z. It's not a focus group. They're really here to help advise the leadership team, to help advise our board of directors on the future strategies for PacSun and weigh in on our IT strategy, weigh in on the different types of technology and innovations that we're considering And it's a game changer in terms of really putting action behind the concept of giving young people a voice in terms of the brand creation. And we see
Mm,
that retail is becoming more participatory. And in the research that we've done in the Pacsun Youth Report, where we work with global data to ensure that we're surveying ourselves, 6,000
yeah.
young people, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, each year to understand the emotive why. Why are these consumer shifts happening? How can we fight
Mm,
some of the common misconceptions about Gen Z and really get at the heart of these young people so that we can then deliver on our mission, which is to inspire the next generation of youth and to build the future of creativity and community with them along our four pillars.
yeah. And I know one of the things that you focus on is music. And I think is this part of the pillars side of things, but I know one of them areas are music. Can you go through some of the different areas that you focus when it comes to culture and other things in this co-creation?
Yes, there's so many things that are important to Gen Z and Gen
Hmm.
Alpha, but at PacSun, we really clearly focus on four. So, music, fashion, sport, and art. And
Mm,
you can see that weave through whether it's your store experience, whether you find PacSun at a Formula One race
yeah.
trackside pop up, or what we did 2 weeks ago at GovBall in New York and our partnership there with, merch. But one of the things that came through the research that we've been doing is this very strong association that young people have with music, and
Mm,
that they now define music as the number one way that they identify with themselves and the world. And
wow.
so music is their number one source of expression for personal identity, even over fashion or sport, which historically might have been lenses that might have had kind of a superpower or supercharge.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
we just came out of our first quarter town hall, and we welcomed the global head of partnerships for Spotify to
Mm,
talk about the latest research that they have on music. And it's so interesting to see how this space continues to evolve for young people and how they're choosing to engage in the music world. So we've ranged in terms of our intersection with music and fashion for many years, starting with our guest artistic director, Asap Rocky, for several
mhm.
years, who helped kind of define the new PacSun as we were evolving in our journey to more recent things that we're doing, whether it be at GovBall, Lollapalooza, Outside Lands, the pop-up we did outside of Coachella, and then showing up with our own PacSun collective, bringing young emerging artist voices and their respective merchandise to life within our stores and online.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. I'm curious. So, your four pillars are obviously very defined here. I'm curious what kind of lessons as you went through the book. I know there had to be different intersections when you were creating this, as there always are, right? You're looking at learning. Like, what kind of takeaways do you think that even if somebody's not necessarily a business leaders watching this and they're not necessarily focusing on maybe music or maybe some of these exact pillars, what are some of those common themes or takeaways that you feel can be just, business lessons for anybody that wants to build a strong organization or community?
First and foremost, I think the book is a story about transformation.
Mm,
So, whether you're building a brand for the first time, or you're looking to transform a legacy brand, or you're looking at your own personal transformation, the
yeah.
book is really grounded in the idea or concept that everything starts with purpose.
Mm,
And that when you're looking at a transformation, it's inside work that has to happen first to then be able turn to your community and to engage with the outside. And so we talk about some of the pain points that we had over the last 2 decades as a brand, and where we were faced with different intersections or crossroads and the decisions that we made. And we have the beautiful ability. I think one of the nicest things about the book is the ability as a sitting CEO to stop and pause and really
yeah.
reflect on the journey, and to reflect on some of the challenges or things that we came across that were most difficult at the time enabled us to really think differently. And so the power of reflection, the power of listening to your community, the
Mm,
power of putting your community first, irrespective of which industry you're in. And I think with the Harvard business case study, they did a deep dive on the power of community and the power of the creator. And one of our youth advisory council members started as a simple customer, and that's chapter 1 of the book, which is called 11,000 Astrids. And she had earned 5,000 followers on TikTok, purchased a pair of jeans in her local Nashville store, and went back to her bedroom to create content and participate in what was called the Open Creator Platform on TikTok Shop. And she sold 11,000 pairs of jeans within the first 48 hours.
That's
And
a lot of jeans, Bree.
especially if you have 5,000 followers. And so I
Right.
think the power of understanding the algorithm, the power of leaning in with your community and empowering them to be your greatest storyteller is really something that comes across quite clearly in the book as a large unlock or learning. And we were also, very transparent and vulnerable in the book in terms of sharing the things that worked and the things that didn't work as we went through this transformation journey.
What was that like to be able to be vulnerable through a book? Because it's one thing to do it in a narrative that's maybe biographical, right? Or something that's like about just your life or something, which that's hard enough. But to do it for a brand as well, I feel like that's another layer of complexity. What was that like to be vulnerable in that?
I think, you really confront some challenges because you're telling the story of so many incredibly talented people who
Right.
were a part of Pacsun's historical journey or are part of the present journey. And you're also speaking to a cohort of people that are in the future journey. And so I think tying that together and acknowledging the difficulties or challenges that you might not know that someone is sitting in when they hold the seat and the choices that they make, and then being able to reflect on that, and then being able to reflect on the power of co-creation and what makes Pacsun so special and so unique in the market. And it's the brands that we celebrate, it's the creators that we celebrate, and most importantly, our community that we celebrate.
Mm.
I think that was a real gift.
Yeah. Amazing. HBS to be getting the this published and the case study published. What was that? What was that? That's wild. I read that and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's well, first off, congrats. That's not, that's an amazing thing to do, but working through that piece of things, what like any learnings from that or like and now that you're on the other side of having that published?
I would say that it is probably one of the most beautiful outcomes of writing
Mm,
a book was the opportunity to then have the Harvard Business School come and study Pacsun as a part of their case studies,
mm,
because it gave a real opportunity to so many people, whether it be people currently working in our field, our store associates, the head of planning and allocation, the head of overall product development and production, to give their own stories about their journey
mm,
and what it meant to transform Pacsun and the power of leading with purpose and co-creation. And so the Harvard business case, even more so than the book, is a tribute to all of the hard work and dedication of so many focused and talented individuals that got a chance to be a part of this really incredible case and to see it studied on a global scale. I was at Harvard in Cambridge just about 2.5 months ago when the first case was taught. And it was really interesting to see people, executives who, this was the advanced management program. So you're looking at executives from a whole range of different industries and globally discussing
mm,
the power of co-creation. And the question that we were really wrestling with in the classroom is, can co-creation exist without purpose? And
mm,
can purpose exist without co-creation? And I speak about a book that I was inspired by during my time at Harvard called The True North by Bill George, which was really transformative for me. And I had my entire leadership team read the book and do the workbook as well. But I really think grounding yourself in your personal purpose, your company or brand's purpose, and then tying back the power of partnering with your community as you
mhm.
move your purpose forward is one of the greatest unlocks of both the Harvard Business Case Study and also one of the greatest unlocks of the book Co-Created.
Mm. I want to circle back to something that you mentioned earlier, and we kind of touched on it a couple times, but I want to go deeper, and that's the Youth Advisory Council. And I'll tell you why. I've thought about this and I've seen how well it's worked, and I thought, okay, in fashion, it may be, I won't use the word obvious, but there's a direct correlation where you can see like, oh, great, music and some of the things that you're doing, it makes sense, it's logical. But I would challenge other leaders out there to be more forward and to think about this. And I'm not going to call call it any particular company, because for all I know, they have one, right? Like, but think about maybe some of our big banks or some of our big financial institutions, like creating these types of councils that are filled with youth to steward some of the decisions that are maybe being made for them and bring them into the dialogue. I just think there's so much learning in what you're doing. Can you elaborate and maybe and kind of expand on why it works so well?
I think for 10 or 20 years, PacSun relied on traditional focus groups, which
Mm,
still hold a lot of merit and value. You're bringing in your customers or your hopeful customers, you're showcasing product, future product, or current product, and getting feedback.
yeah.
What we recognized is that is surface learning that stays at the top. You can
Mm,
also gather anyone, any leader, any brand can gather social listening. What are people saying about your brand on Reddit, on
mm,
Discord, on IG, or engaging with them in TikTok? But really giving them a seat at the table and
mm,
sharing with them the long range plan, the strategic thinking, and getting that kind of organic, authentic feedback is so invaluable. And I believe that with the spending power coming of Gen Z and in particular Gen Alpha, deeply understanding why a brand will matter to them in the future is important to all of us. And so that's something that PacSun has put a lot of resources and effort in terms of operationalizing
mm.
so that they're not one off conversations. This cohort of 14 people
Yeah.
hold a 12-month position, and they're engaging with the leadership team with high frequency. We just had a Zoom call with all of them on to do a deep dive in terms of competitive set, the malls. They're
Is
live.
that fun, by the way? I just have to throw that out there. It sounds, is that like wow, you're getting the like right from the source, right? Like, is that, there's got to be a level of fun on that too.
I mean, I think it's fantastic. I
Yeah.
still think one of the greatest privileges of being a leader in this role is you can go to any store across the country. PacSun has over 300 and pop in and get live customer feedback, having them here at headquarters or over Zoom with us or getting
Mm,
the feedback over text. It's so great because you have a live line right to the source. And so
mm,
I think, no filters and a lot of transparency. And, I think it goes both ways. They look at it as an opportunity to be mentored, an opportunity to help
mm.
shape the future of one of their favorite brands. And so it's really been a fantastic program and one we're looking forward to evolving and continuing to evolve as time moves forward.
Mm. So, Bree, last thing I want to touch on here, I want to maybe just draw it out a little bit further. So, this concept of building, we've been talking about a lot, and co-creation. So, building with your community versus, or rather than, building, for them. Can you go a little bit deeper into that nuance? I know you've talked about maybe operationalizing, adding to the system, but can you go deeper on that? What that can look like, whether it's a launch you've done or something else, just to give us a little bit more of a visual around that.
Yeah, I think the traditional concept of brands or companies marketing to the consumer and kind of this command and control relationship
Mhm,
going to become obsolete in the future when you're looking at these younger generations. They consider themselves in the research the greatest storytellers of all time, and they consider
mhm,
themselves the most influential cohort when it comes to who they respect and look up to. And so I think there's a lot of interesting intersections, and I think that the cohort will continue to evolve. But I think as we look at the power of co creation and what will set us apart, it's really being purpose driven. So, our
mm,
purpose being to inspire the next generation of youth. And then you layer on top the power of creating with your community and co creation going through all parts of our ecosystem and
mm,
every single decision that we make. And you can see it in the brands that we choose to partner with, in the PacSun Community Hub, which is our new app, which really encourages creativity, innovation, curiosity, community, the power of social commerce all in one space. You see it
mm,
in the way we pop up at GovBall, bringing, tons of young people to celebrate and for them to market for the event as opposed to our teams doing that.
mm,
So I think in every step, there is a sliver of the power of co creation as the underlying backbone. And then we're constantly looking at the feedback circle to see if what we're doing is resonating with the community because
mhm.
ultimately they're voting.
Yeah. Love it. Bree, this has been great having you back on. Congrats again on the book, Co-Created, the cultural strategy that redefined Pacsun. Everybody go grab a copy. And speaking of that, if somebody wants to pick up a copy of the book, follow the brand, you mentioned a new version of the app, like give us some of the, like, how do people connect? How do they follow up, please?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. You can find a copy of the book at pacsun.com. You can find it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or at your local bookstore. I also encourage you to follow along at Pacsun on TikTok and Instagram, or Brieane Olson on Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I super appreciate you having me here today.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure. And for everybody listening, just so you know, we'll definitely put some links into the show notes so you can just click on the links and head right on over. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show. You heard me correct. Each and every day, we're bringing you new content, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along the way on your journey as well. So hit that subscribe or follow button. And Bree, congrats again. So happy for the case study, the book. You guys are rocking and rolling. So congrats and keep up the great work.
Thank you so much. I'll see you at the Purpose Summit.